President Biden touted his administration's economic policies during a speech today in Chicago. He framed his agenda as a break from Republicans' approach to economic policy. This pitch comes as the president is quite evidently ramping up his reelection campaign. One problem? Recent CBS News polling finds a majority of Americans think the condition of the economy is bad, much worse than the president described today in Chicago. For more on this, Ed O'Keefe and Robert Costa join us now. Ed, as you well know, is CBS News' senior White House and political correspondent. Robert is CBS News' chief election and campaign correspondent. Ed, I want to start with you. We heard in the open of the show the president, before he got to Chicago, confidently saying there's not going to be a recession. That seemed to me to be among the most important things the president said, not just about the economy now, but where he thinks it's heading.
Perhaps more importantly, where it's headed, because that tape will be used against him in the court of public opinion in the coming months, should there suddenly be a recession. But this White House remains confident that one is going to be avoided, at least in the coming months, and continues to believe that the American people are going to come to understand why it is that they think the economy is doing so well, as all of the big legislation he's passed in the last 2 years starts to be implemented, as the money starts to get spent, as the airports start to get rebuilt, as the construction projects to fix climate change issues are done. It's just that it hasn't quite sunk in yet with the American public. They like to point out that, sure, on the question of is he handling the economy well, he's mired in the 30s. But when you talk about other more specific economic agenda items that have been implemented or are being implemented or that he's pushing for, they pull well individually with the American public. So it's now on them to sort of get it into the bloodstream and the mindset of Americans that, in fact, it is the president and his administration that's implementing these things. Remember, these numbers are bad as we look at them here, but we're looking at a record low unemployment rate right now. Economic growth, even though it may not be, as big as it was right after the pandemic, for example, or pre-pandemic, it is growing. Inflation, while still up above the 2% that the Fed would like, is coming off of the highs that we were seeing at various points late last year and early this year. So they're like, they got to get out there now and sell this, understanding that the economy is going to be issue number one going into next year.
Right. And I want to look at another part of our polling data about how assessments of the president's handling of the economy break down by party. And I want to focus in on the 69% disapproval among independents. Of course, there's a partisan breakdown. Republicans, 89%, are dissatisfied. 67% of Democrats approve. That's what we would expect. The thing that really fascinates me is 69% of independents, and the White House knows they've got to move that number. And as you also know, Ed, in politics, the mantra is don't tell, show. And that's what the White House has got to focus on.
And the problem is, the frustration they have is that they can't quite show it just yet because not all the shovels are in the ground, right? Not all the highways have been rebuilt, except for that one in Philadelphia that fell apart a few weeks ago because it just so happens to be in like the swing zip code in the swing city in the swing state that also happens to be a place the president knows well. And all the other money that's going out now for broadband expansion he was talking about on Monday, you're not going to feel that. You're not going to see it. You're not going to know somebody working on that project or who suddenly has Wi-Fi that didn't before for another year or two, potentially. And by then, politically at least, it might be too late. And so they got to get out there and talk about this as much as he can, but look for them to find examples of the showing, not the telling, in the coming months. They're going to need them if they're going to close that gap, especially, as you point out there, with independents. Robert Costa,
you talk to a lot of Republicans. You're a bit out on the campaign trail, in addition to continuing to monitor the many legal issues encircling former President Trump, and we'll get to those in a second. When you talk to Republicans, how do they feel about the coming economic debate with Biden and reelection?
They feel pretty good about what it would be like in a general election, but it's hard to predict how the economy is going to be a year from now. At this point, there's a tension a bit between those in the Republican Party who want to advocate for wholesale change to long-term federal spending and those who do not. Trump, infamously or famously, depending on where you stand in the Republican Party, said he didn't want to tackle Medicare and Social Security in the same way former House Speaker Paul Ryan did when he was in power. And you see now former Vice President Mike Pence, he's arguing that on the economic front and fiscal front, America needs to tackle these issues to maybe calibrate and recalibrate the age of retirement, how these programs are allocated with federal dollars, how they're spending, and how big they are as federal institutions. And Trump is saying we don't want to touch them. And so that's really, I think, more on a fiscal front than an economic front, the argument. There's still generally this kind of Reaganite growth-oriented rhetoric inside the GOP Republican primary race right now, and that's not changing. It's the fiscal area that's the real divide.
And I know, Robert, you spend a lot of time going over what Trump's legal team is doing, but also what the former president says about various legal matters. And yesterday, it struck me, in New Hampshire and in flying back to Florida, he gave in one day 3 different answers about what happened in Bedminster, New Jersey, which is not a charged part of the federal indictment, but it goes to his questioning, or the question's been raised about how seriously he takes the handling of sensitive or classified information. Once he said there's no documents, then he said there were documents, but they weren't classified. And then the other time he said it was bravado. To the degree that you can assess how all these different answers from the former president either help or hurt the defense he and his team are going to have to ultimately mount.
Well, speaking of his team, it's evident talking to allies of former President Trump that his team doesn't have much control over their client. He is speaking about an ongoing case where he could face a trial in the coming months as he runs for president. And he's deciding to speak out in a convoluted, winding way about his intent and what he did. And so much of this case is about whether Trump had criminal intent to illegally hold records that were classified, to obstruct an investigation. And by giving all these answers in news media interviews, he's providing fodder for prosecutors to scour these statements and to potentially include them in a trial. Because just because you say something that's not under oath doesn't mean it can't be introduced as evidence.
Indeed, indeed. Ed, real quickly, from the White House, when you saw the president before he boarded Marine One for Chicago, you noticed something about him. Tell our audience what you noticed and what the White House has since confirmed.
Yeah, I don't know if we have an image of this, but our colleagues Gabrielle Ake and Willie Inman were out there this morning when he went to Marine One and took a few questions. And they and other reporters couldn't help but notice that there were these almost like strap marks right here on his cheeks. And we went back, you can see it there ever so slightly. We went back and looked, and there had been similar markings on Monday when he did an event here at the White House. So clearly he'd been wearing something. We asked the White House, what's up here? And we've been reminded that back in 2008, when he was picked as Barack Obama's running mate, he disclosed that he'd been treated for sleep apnea. This is something that affects about 30 million Americans. Common sleep disorder that basically can affect your breathing at night. It can cause you even to wake up if you stop breathing. But you can use a mechanism called a CPAP that you put over your mouth to continue giving you oxygen no matter what. You just have to wear it really tight. This is what I've been told. I'm no doctor. I'm no user of such a device, but this is what I've been told. So that's what that marking was. In essence, they confirmed he's been using one over the last few weeks. This is a common thing for somebody who has it. The sleep apnea had been revealed in his records back in 2008. There was nothing about it in his most recent medical report, other than to point out that he'd had some sinus surgery back in the day to deal with congestion. He, like many others, including this reporter, maybe you guys, takes a Claritin or an Allegra during allergy season and a nasal spray to deal with some of that stuff, a common thing. Of course, all of this against the backdrop of voter concern, well documented, not us, the voters, concerned about his age and whether he'll be fit to serve, but they were very quick to disclose that when it was pretty clear something was up based on the markings on his face.
And just to be clear, Ed, this is not a medical complication or issue. It's just a treatment for a very common issue that many Americans have.
Precisely, and it's why presidents are subject to such great scrutiny, because they are, after all, one of the most photographed people in the world.
No doubt about that. Ed O'Keefe at the White House, Robert Costa here in the studio. Thanks so very much.